Something in the board chambers had changed. It wasn't like the lighting had shifted, throwing dramatic and sinister shadows about the high-ceilinged room. None of the supervisors had disappeared suddenly and without explanation from their high-backed chairs beyond the dais. No, nothing as overtly, as cinematically dramatic as that had occurred. But in the slow motion and subtle world of local politics, a world of position jockeying and carefully considered words, a bomb had gone off. It had come after the chair, Chris Howard, had asked for the vote on the continuance of a ban on commercial cannabis activity in Norte County. A mere 40 or so days before, the board had voted unanimously to enact a temporary moratorium on pot. It was explained at the time that this ban was meant to be a stopgap measure, something on our books that, under the power-sharing model of state and local regulation of newly legal marijuana, would maintain local control of the new industry. The hope was that ensuring the primacy of local community standards would ease the enactment of a still controversial proposition. Across the state, as Sacramento hammered out the details of legalizing weed, each county had been dealing with impending legalization, deciding what kind of industry it would allow, land use and zoning issues, the stuff that makes local government sexy. A remarkably few counties were ready to roll on January 1st. Many, like Del Norte, adopted outright bans. Most meant to buy more time for study and careful ordinancing. That's how our Board of Supervisors sold the ban. Without it, the state would begin issuing all manner of cannabis licenses on January 1st, and we would have no control over the growth of the cannabis industry in Del Norte. Back in September, the board had created the Cannabis Working Group, a committee comprised of local co-op managers, growers, farmers, business leaders, government, and law enforcement officials. The working group was tasked with basically making up Del Norte's cannabis policy, deciding amongst themselves what issues needed to be addressed and, with the help of county council, fashioning the appropriate local ordinances. Now, these ordinances were to be brought before the board and enacted piecemeal, slowly rolling back the ban until it disappeared entirely behind a wall of locally relevant marijuana laws. The Board of Supervisors voted unanimously to create and follow this course, and it had, until Chris Howard asked for the vote on the continuance of the temporary ban. The first supervisor called was Bob Berkowitz. This is how it went down. And notice how Bob forgets to turn on his microphone at the beginning. Total power play.
Kylie, please pull the vote.
Supervisor Berkowitz?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a statement before I vote.
Please.
Thank you. We've been dealing with this issue for months and months. Our attorney has pleaded with us to give him some direction. And we failed to do so. We have formed a working group to come up with a policy on cannabis, and yet this board has not given him any direction as where this board wants to go. Does the board want to ban it? We don't know. Does the board want to limit the sale and use of this? We don't know. Does the board want to have a limited number of applicants? We don't know. Will the board limit distribution? We don't know. Because the board has given no direction to the working group, that group has no idea of what this group will accept. It's time this board made a decision. Let's quit kicking the rocks down the sewer. Let's let all of Norte County know where we stand. If we extend the 10-month moratorium, we end up doing a disservice to those who want to start a cannabis business, because they will be waiting those 10 months for an answer that never may come, because this vote, or this board, could vote for another extension. We do a disservice to the general public because they will not know where this board stands. They need to know if this board is going to vote to have a pot farm in their residential neighborhood or next to a church or next to a school. The bottom line is this board, members of this board need to know, let the community know where they stand. The only way to ensure that is to vote down this extension and give Cannabis Working Group a limited time to come up with a cannabis policy. We've already heard that they will work day and night for this, and we can get this done in short order. And that's why I'm voting to end, not to end this ban and give this board direction as stated in the alternative in this agenda. So my vote is to vote no for this extension.
And in that little undramatic speech, Supervisor Berkowitz derailed months of county planning, throwing the nature of the cannabis industry in Del Norte into uncertainty. He firmly set the board against itself. Nothing new, it's true. But perhaps Bob's worst offense was committing a cardinal Del Norte sin, something local politicians have derided and accused each other of since our county's founding. He gave up control and authority to Sacramento. Hi, I'm Paul Critz, and you're listening to The Del Norter, a production of KFUG Community Radio. The topic of this inaugural podcast is simple: us and them. Since the election of Trump, Del Norte, like many other localities, has seen its share of divisiveness. We were one of California's rural red counties in that election, yet being nestled in the redwoods of Northern California also means that there are more than a few libtards and snowflakes, as I've personally been called on Facebook, who are aghast at the state of the nation. And I have to confess to being part of the vitriol. One recent morning, over a cup of coffee, I invited a stranger to perform an unnatural act on himself and unfriended another person for starting a post with the unironic statement, "Our president is a genius." There's no high ground here. But recently, while out walking the Cadra Point Loop along the shores of Lake Earl, I witnessed a cohort of swallows rise from the reeds into the bright gray sky, their white breasts and split black tails slicing and darting through the unusually warm December air. It was late afternoon, dinner time. I love swallows. They fly like jets. I track their motion, a seemingly chaotic frenzy, working the shoreline as a group, gradually moving ashore toward the path I was walking. Just when they were almost overhead, they rose again as a group, broke like a wave on rocks, and tumbled back toward the littoral of dark green reeds from which they'd come. Briefly, arrogantly, I wondered if my presence had somehow stopped them. I turned and scanned the meadow at my back for swarms of grateful hovering insects and saw why the white-breasted swallows had suddenly left. Just above the crest of the sea of blanched dune grass before me dodged a squadron of golden-breasted swallows. They traced the contours of the meadow adroitly, climbing the house-size face of a nearby dune like surfers carving a wave, nosing up and reversing direction, with a tuck of the wings and a twitch of the tail, a motion that flashed in a dark instant above a flowing field of amber blur. Off toward the lake, swinging low above the taller brush at the edge of the meadow, I saw a single white-breasted swallow that apparently hadn't gotten the signal to retreat. Two golden breasts rose from cover and turned him, or her, harassing the white-breasted intruder back across the path to the shore. Standing there watching this scrimmage of swallows, I wondered if division, discrimination, jealousy were natural occurrences bred in the flesh of all living beings. And if so, could we humans ever truly rise above our natures and work together for more than a fleeting instant? After the Board of Supervisors' cannabis ban vote, while it looked like the measure was still open for debate and the supervisors were trading accusations of political maneuvering, Blake Inscore stood up as a member of the public to offer his 2 cents. Blake is a minister and the mayor of the only real town in Del Norte County, Crescent City. My apologies to Smith River and Gasky and Fort Dick and Klamath. He's a reasonable, competent, approachable public servant, and I've had him on KFUG several times to discuss issues and shoot the breeze. Under his watch, Crescent City has enacted its own ban on commercial cannabis so that the city can get a handle on the changing reality. As usual, he spoke directly to the issue.
Blake Inscore, Crescent City Mayor. I would just encourage all of you, and I haven't talked to any of you about this, but I do have a stake in the game, obviously, as a community partner and as a municipality who is concurrently trying to draft ordinances as we speak. One of the things that I have heard repeatedly is that we need to do it right the first time, and I completely agree with that. I would just implore you on behalf of your staff and as a community partner, you got 2 days, you got 48 hours, give 24 hours notice, have a special meeting, and consider at least a 45-day interim ban, and let your staff and the working group come back to you with the information that they've gotten so far and say, this is where we are. If you want us to push it faster, here's where we are, here's your information, and make a good decision. You're not in that big. 10 months does seem like a long time. I can understand that, and the community certainly is pushing to try to get you guys to do something. And I agree. We as elected leaders do need to act, and we need to take up these tasks. And if 10 months seems too long, I would just encourage you, schedule a special meeting before Thursday. Do not give the state control in our county over this. The state has got their head up there. You know what? I'm sorry. That's probably a highly inappropriate thing for the mayor of Crescent City and a minister in our community to say. But I got that directly from our state senator. We do not want to give state control to this. Give your staff and the working group at least the respect of 45 days to come back to you and report to you, and then take action if that's what you want to do. But I think you can call a special meeting, be back here before Thursday, and at least give 45 days for your staff and the working group to come back to you and say, well, this is where we are. It's untenable to me to turn over control to the state. I don't think any of us trust our state enough to do that. And that's my big concern.
The heart of this cannabis matter in Del Norte isn't the moral acceptance of weed. It's not the chronic 3-2 division of the Board of Supervisors, nor is it an effort, as Bob said, to foster economic development in the county and force the other supervisors to state openly their pot views. The heart is this. Bob Berkowitz did what no self-respecting Del Norte politician would ever openly have done. He gave up control of an issue to the state of California. And to understand just what a transgression this is, you have to know a little bit more about Del Norte and its history, and you have to know about the state of Jefferson. The tale starts a little something like this. Late in 1941, motivated by what he perceived as uneven representation in their respective state houses, Gilbert Gable, mayor of Port Orford, Oregon, proposed the number of southern Oregon and northern California counties straddling the state line join together to create the state of Jefferson. Perhaps not surprisingly, Mayor Gable's call resonated with the rural counties, and over the next few weeks, the statehood movement picked up a little steam. On a Thursday in late November of that year, a group of gun-toting men began stopping traffic on Highway 99 outside of Wairika. They handed the confused motorists a proclamation of independence stating that the state of Jefferson was engaged in a, quote, patriotic rebellion against the states of California and Oregon, and that they would continue to, again quote, secede every Thursday until further notice. The district attorney of Del Norte County, John Leon Childs, was named provisional governor on December 4th. Then, 3 days later, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, and the Jefferson State movement was quickly subsumed by the Second World War. While it's easy to write off the state of Jefferson as half-baked populism, a pipe dream that would result in creating one of the poorer states in the Union, you can't completely ignore the points the movement made. At the time, the views expressed by the Jeffersonians were seen as pretty legitimate. Stanton Delaplane of the San Francisco Chronicle was awarded the 1942 Pulitzer Prize for reporting for his coverage of the movement. And in the intervening years, it's hard to argue that anything has changed. Sometimes it does seem that the rural counties have, at best, a squeaky little voice in Sacramento. Often, decisions are made in the State House that directly affect life in Del Norte, with little or no input from the people living here. Take the environmental movement. Now, I'm as green as I can be. I believe that there are few things as short-sighted as using up all your resources without an eye towards sustainability. I grew up proud that California was leading the way in championing the successful stewardship of our aesthetic and economic bounty. But in Del Norte, the burgeoning environmental awareness of the latter half of the 20th century meant something else entirely. It meant the end of a way of life. Over the 30 years from 1970 to 2000, Del Norte County saw new state regulations gut the native fishing and logging industries. By the early 1980s, unemployment in Del Norte was near 25%, rivaling the Great Depression. Over that same time, vast swaths of the county were set aside for national and state parks, recreational areas, wildlife preserves, until nearly 80% of the land in Del Norte County was public, meaning it was no longer on the tax rolls, further restricting the ability of the county to make a living. The state of California threw Del Norte a bone in the early 90s, building one of the largest, baddest prisons in the free world, Pelican Bay, the crowning jewel in a spree of prison building by the state that peaked in the early 2000s. To this day, the prison is the biggest employer in Del Norte, and I sometimes wonder just what this place would be like if the prison hadn't been built. And that's the complex nature of our county's relationship with the state. It often seems that the state doesn't give a fig about Del Norte or the people who inhabit it, while at the same time, the state is the only reason Del Norte is even still here. It's easy to see why even local men of God, like Blake Inscore, can be skeptical about allowing the state to run the show, any show, in Del Norte County. In the wake of the Board of Supervisors' vote, the part of the community that cares about pot laws and public policy lost their minds. Right away, Facebook lit up with threads. Jesse Davis, chair of the Cannabis Working Group, challenged Bob Berkowitz to a debate on KFUG. The Friday after the vote, Jesse came on the radio and offered up some choice words on the working group, its process, and the consequences of abandoning its work.
You have to attend these meetings if you're in any way, if you're engaged in the business in cannabis in any way, if you want to be, if you are interested in personal regulations for cultivation, anything related to cannabis and regulations in the county, definitely come. If you're opposed to cannabis in any way, you need to come to the working groups to get your voice on record. The working group is there to consider the view of the entire community. The working group is the community. That is the most important thing to remember. And that's the main thing that we're doing. It's not just creation of a cannabis ordinance. We're trying to assemble the entire community together, build the trust and the respect of the entire community. And that's the most powerful force in the county and in any government. The community is far more powerful than the Board of Supervisors. The community owns the Board of Supervisors.
That's right.
The Board of Supervisors are there as a gift from the voters, and that gift can be revoked.
The week after the vote, the chair of the Board of Supervisors, Chris Howard, published an op-ed piece in the paper accusing Bob and Roger of nefarious and unethical political grandstanding. Bob retorted in the same space later in the week, publishing the comments he'd made from the dais just prior to the vote. In his defense, Bob Berkowitz has stuck to his guns after the controversial vote, even coming on KFUG after his back and forth in the paper and admitting that the vote was a political move.
But I've got to give Chris Howard some due.
That was a measured pause.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
In fact, I was wrong. I was wrong at the board meeting.
How so?
Well, Mr. Howard said, "You're making this into, it's all political." And I said, "No, you're making the one that says the statement is political." And I'm revising my statement, basically, to you. First
Okay.
time. It is political. everything we do is political.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we are, as we like to say, we're statesmen. No, we're politicians. And so that's the kind of thing. Yeah, it's politics.
Now,
But it shouldn't be this kind of politics that damages your integrity and challenges
the personal politics
challenges you on your honesty.
and while no one can say for certain what the next couple of months might hold for Del Norte and the unregulated, at least locally, cannabis industry, the risk, as Bob sees it, is far outweighed by the benefits of moving forward with legal cannabis. And I can also kind of see how Chris Howard would think this is some sort of political ploy to get the board to do something.
It is. I'll give him that.
Sure, but it leaves...
It is a political ploy to get him to do something.
It leaves, first off, the county open without anything on the books right now to see what happens. And that's also a very un-Del Norte thing to do, Bob.
Hey, I'm ready to take that risk.
Are you ready?
Sure. Right. Look, okay, unlike a lot of others in this position that you've seen before, I have no ambitions to be a career politician. My voters can get rid of me at any time. All right? If they want to recall me because they don't like what I've done, they can do that.
Okay.
If they want to vote me out at the next election, should I determine that I want to run again?
That's the caveat in Del Norte County.
Right.
If I even want to put myself through this again,
That's right.
They can change it.
So that's the risk. But I'm saying, okay, I'm going to do as much as I can for what the voters in my district and the county
and every district
wanted to have done.
I have to admit that my initial reaction to Supervisor Berkowitz's vote was disbelief. And while his stance is rife with political maneuvering and more than a touch of sloppy thinking and maybe even a little hypocrisy, I mean, hanging the very people he says he's trying to help, people who want to operate cannabis businesses in Del Norte, out on a limb with impending local ordinances, I have to confess that he has a point, wanting a more public understanding of what the rest of the board thinks about pot. Jesse Davis has said so as well, a rare piece of common ground in this issue. As it stands right now, everything is on hold. 2 of the 5 supervisors are in Japan visiting our soon-to-be sister city. The county is working, presumably, on a new, permanent ban, which should be introduced before the board within the month. Maybe we'll dodge this bullet. Bob said in his interview that he didn't think people would be so dumb as to invest heavily in a new cannabis venture with the future so uncertain. Maybe Bob's faith in the public sector is a good thing, and all this ban, no ban, bananas could have some positive outcomes. Case in point, Patrick Smith. Patrick operates a local business, Green Bicycles. He makes soil amendments, primarily for the cannabis industry. And this January, he organized the first ever 2-state cannabis expo and flower competition at the Del Norte Fairgrounds. Taking full advantage of our regional identification, the event was called the Jefferson Cup and featured industry experts, artists, and, well, listen to the promo we put together for the Cup at KFUG. We're justifiably proud. Coming to the Del Norte Fairgrounds Saturday. It's the first ever California-Oregon Jefferson State Cup and Cannabis Expo.
Dude, weed show!
It's a cannabis expo.
3 buildings filled with the future of legal cannabis in Del Norte and Jefferson State. Vendors, presentations, workshops from growing the best flowers
Best bud.
to expert legal advice on navigating the new cannabis reality.
Dude, we could score some killer pot!
This is not a sales event.
Ask industry experts, local policymakers, and law enforcement the questions you need answered. And find out which regional bud is the winner of the Jefferson State Cup and an ounce of solid gold.
16 to the pound.
Dude, let's go and smoke out and check out the killer art and belly dancers.
This is a non-consumption event.
Okay, well then we'll bring all my friends from gym class.
This is an over 21 event.
Step into the legal cannabis future this Saturday at the Del Norte Fairgrounds from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. at the first ever California-Oregon Jefferson State Cup and Cannabis Expo. Brought to you by Green Bicycles, because those in the know. The California-Oregon Jefferson State Cup and Cannabis Expo this Saturday.
Don't miss it.
The Jefferson Cup drew around 1,200 people. Supervisors Berkowitz and Gitlin were even in attendance, along with the chief of police, who sat in on a panel discussion. A Humboldt grower took the gold with the proprietary strain, and the silver went to a farm in southern Oregon. After the Cup, I had Patrick back on KFUG to sum up, and he shared a pretty cool idea.
What, then we split then, first and second place? It was a California first place and a Southern Oregon second place?
Yeah, we had entries about equal from both states, and judges were equal from both states, and we live in a hotbed area for very high quality products. There's no doubt about that.
All right, so it begs the question then, are you going to do an event like this again?
I would love to. I would love doing 4th of July in this town, but we'll have to. It's kind of quick, but I'd like to put something together for the tourists to have something to do.
Yeah.
But we'll see how the wheels in motion. I think a lot.
Are you going to shoot for something this year?
I am.
Okay.
I'm kind of waiting to see where the county goes.
Yeah.
because this event could be expanded to include consumption. And those
or sales, right?
Sales and
commercial
consumption,
sales,
they absolutely can if sales are allowed in the area. So we're going to see how that goes.
And that could be. Are you thinking fairgrounds again or some other place?
Yeah, we'll have to. Fairgrounds is a nice place to do it. That the infrastructure's there, the bathrooms, the parking, all that stuff's kind of set up, that buildings or tents or whatever. So fairgrounds is a nice place, and I don't think they do a whole lot on the 4th of July week.
Imagine it. The 4th of July in Del Norte, the usual small-town coolness, the parade, the park, the people, the fireworks, the fog, and a cannabis expo at the fairgrounds. We in Del Norte are always trying to find ways to draw in tourists, to fill the parking lots, we say. And in an ancillary way, we're also constantly striving to define ourselves. Are we an impoverished, meth-addled, blighted community of government dependence, or are we a charming seaside county with a working-class heritage and some really beautiful nature? Who is us, and who is them? And it seems, as with this cannabis ban issue, as soon as lines are drawn, perspectives shift and things start looking different. Again, here's Patrick Smith.
Will this window with the state in charge and there being no ordinances for Del Norte County and no ban in place, would it make it easier for you to put on an event like a 4th of July Cup?
That's a real good question, because one of the first things you have to do is get approval from the local jurisdiction, which I'm not sure what. So I'm not sure what box they would check.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I just don't know, because I think it's what they get is a form from the state, kind of what I've heard, and then the county or the city or whoever says yes or no.
Yeah,
I'm just not sure how. If there's no guidance from the county, I'm not sure how they would check that box.
As I understand it, the box is the person, or is this license, the issuance of this license, in compliance with the local ordinances in your county? And if you don't have any ordinances, then yes.
Okay, well, then at this point it could happen. And actually, I do have one of the licenses for a cannabis event organizer. So I from state of California, I can throw it if the local jurisdiction agrees upon it. That's part of the process.
So, did Bob Berkowitz's vote just make a 4th of July cannabis festival possible? See, that's what I mean about shifting perspectives. You can disagree with the methods, you can disagree with the ends, but when all we hear is the vitriol surrounding an issue, when all we see is the grandstanding, we lose sight of the issue that unites us, even if only in a dance of opposition. Which takes me back to Lake Earl and the swallows. One band working the shallows, the other the meadow. Regardless of territories or the deliciousness of flying insects, the fact remains. They were all swallows going about their swallow lives. I'm not going to end this podcast with some call to remember that we're all family and can't we all just get along? The swallows sure didn't. But no blood was drawn. They didn't seem concerned with the logic of being an us or them. They were only drawn by food onto an opposing band's turf. The group definitions didn't change. The lines they drew around themselves did. They shifted, were opposed, and adjusted to new realities. Because in the end, the lake was big enough for both tribes. Just as, in the end, the Del Norte experience is big enough for all of us to be, well, us. You've been listening to The Del Norte, a production of KFUG Community Radio. The interviews featured in this podcast are available in full on our website, kfugradio.org. All rights reserved, all copyright hocus pocus enacted. Enter at your own risk. Do not spindle or mutilate. If symptoms do not clear within 6 days, discontinue use. If you'd like to reach me, Paul Critz, you can by emailing justpaul@kfugradio.org. That's JUSTPAUL. I'm on Facebook and all that too. Until next time.